Greetings, fellow travelers. This is Krotnip, welcoming you back to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. Today's episode is going to be my first in the series of pieces on the Hegemony of Embersig. Now that I have mostly covered the Northern Tribes units and plan to cover the few ones undone as of right now in the near future, I put up a poll on the YouTube channel about what faction or factions I should be moving to next when doing these analysis pieces, since I feel that these are the core of what this channel is all about. We got some votes in YouTube and also people weighed in on the Discord. And eventually I chose that I'm going to be doing hegemony pieces since they were highly requested, but there was also a lot of people or some number of people yearning for science of Yaldabaoth content, so expect that going forward also. But today it's all about the guys in and girls in black and purple, and let's talk about the Black Legion Bucklermen, the basic infantry unit of the Hegemony of Embersig. So who are the Bucklermen? The Black Legion, that is the main military force of the Hegemony, is a heavily armed and heavily equipped professional force that effectively seeks to trade blows with its enemy and utilize its superior discipline and logistics to grind them down. And this is reflected in the fact that many of the or most of the infantry units released for the hegemony so far are either heavy infantry or ranged infantry, if we categorize them. But the Bucklermen are the light infantry version of what one can expect from the Black Legion. They are trading some of their protection and their heavy hitting power for added maneuverability, which is something that the Black Legion seems to feel that its other troops are lacking. So this is the type of unit that's supposed to take the fight to the enemy, advance through broken ground if necessary, secure and capture objectives, and hopefully leave the heaviest of fighting for other units. So a pretty different backstory and different categorization of a unit when we compare to other basic infantry such as the Orc Hunters. Here we have the card, or the top half of the card, which has all the information on the Black Legion Bucklermen, taken from the Corvus Belli press kit, so it's a PDF file that you all can download if you know where to find it. Let's get down to talking about this unit's basic stats. As we can see, the Black Legion Bucklermen come in at very cheap points cost. At only 20 points a unit, they are equally cheap as the Orc Hunters that I love so much, and this is going to be a key attribute of the unit going forward. When we talk about the things that the Black Legion Bucklermen can and cannot do, we do need to reflect back on this points cost of 20 and look for things that they can do that's not something you would expect out of a 20-point unit. And when we find the things that they are unable to execute or any weaknesses that they have, we need to reflect again back on the fact that, okay, we are talking about a really cheap basic infantry unit. Is it such a big problem that they can't do this, or they are somewhat susceptible to that? The movement characteristics of the Black Legion Bucklermen are quite interesting. At movement 3-3, they are slightly faster when maneuvering for position than, let's say, most Orc units, but at the same time they are slower than Varrank and Elven units that we have seen so far. They also have a somewhat lackluster charge distance of 9 strides, which means that if a face-off type situation develops where a unit of Bucklermen is advancing on the enemy and the enemy is advancing on them, the chances are that the enemy is going to be able to engineer a situation where they are going to be the one who gets the charge off, and thus they get the rerolls and the first chance to inflict damage. And this is something that the Black Legion Bucklermen and to a larger extent the human and dwarven units of the hegemony more or less have to work around or work with, since their charge distances seem below average from what we have seen in the game so far. At 4 models per unit and 2 wounds per model, we are looking at a 5-point cost per Bucklerman, which is really cheap, and pushing wounds through to these soldiers is going to be difficult, especially in a cost-effective way when we combine their cheap cost with their excellent defensive characteristics, as we are going to be going forward. As a basic infantry unit, the Bucklermen suffer from the standard handicap that's usually associated with these types of units, and that is low willpower and weak morale. Unless they are somehow strengthened in these departments, as is the way with most units of this type, the Bucklermen are pretty easy to scare off. If you can target their willpower, and their lackluster morale characteristic also means that they won't be able to endure a lot of stress before they become unable to activate again. Then again, as we are going to see, the Black Legion Bucklermen aren't exactly the type of unit that loves to go and activate time and time again, but rather they are more of a unit that takes up position and then holds that position cost effectively, so this shouldn't be too much of a problem. At availability 3, you can basically have as many Black Legion Bucklermen units in your list as your heart desires, but unlike the Orc Hunters, I think the position held by the Black Legion Bucklermen in a Hegemony of Embersig list is more under threat from the more elite Black Legion units that can more or less do the same stuff as the Bucklermen, given at not at this cheap a price point. So I personally don't see myself running, for example, 3 units of Bucklermen under any normal circumstances. But hey, you never know. Somebody can prove me wrong and then post a list that they have had success with that spams the Black Legion Bucklermen. The only keywords that the Bucklermen have are human and infantry, and where these keywords effectively come in is when determining what characters can join the Bucklermen. So there are a few different keyword combinations in the Hegemony of Embersig when it comes to joining units, but the most common ones are join infantry and join X cultured infantry, so either infantry or human infantry will get the job done for characters looking to come along with this light infantry unit. As you can see, the Black Legion Bucklermen are an extremely rare breed of basic infantry unit in that they have actually a whopping conquest value of 2 when at full strength. And this is quite something. For 20 points you can get a unit that starts off at Conquest 2 before you add any characters, any special abilities, any command skills that your, for example, High Command might have access to. And this is a really big deal from where I stand. This conquest value of 2 means that the Bucklermen can cost effectively compete for the control of important battlefield objectives, which puts the onus on your opponent to spend more resources to outconquest, outfight, outperform a really cheap and, let's face it, sacrificable unit of yours. So that's a key tactical characteristic of this unit that I would personally look to make the best possible use of as often as possible. You do need to note, however, that at half strength the unit drops to a more standard conquest value of 1. This is something that can be somewhat safeguarded against by attaching a cheap, or, well, why not expensive also, officer type character to the unit, which means that the amount of losses that they need to suffer for this reduced conquest value goes up from 2 to 3, and any additional defensive performance that the officer usually brings when it comes to the hegemony forces will go even further in making the unit retain its high conquest value, although at the same time obviously that's going to impact the total cost of the tactical asset, and that means that they may not be as competitive when outconquesting their enemies as the basic unit would be. Here we have the attack breakdown for the Bucklermen unit. As you can see, the red dice and the 3 orange dice aren't all that bad when it comes for the attack value of a basic infantry unit, as they provide the Black Legion Bucklermen with an average of 3 and a maximum of 5 successes per attack. This is a decent enough attack roll in my opinion, but where the problem comes in is that the Black Legion Bucklermen lack any additional damage drivers that they would have access to from the unit itself when compared to other basic infantry units that we have seen so far, such as for example the Blades of Carthador. I think it is on the Intacts, or the Vulnerable Inflicting Switch on the Orc Hunters. What's furthermore, for example, the Northern Tribes faction as a whole is really adept at finding additional ways of inflicting damage and boosting the damage value of their units. And then again, as the hegemony is more of the defensive and control oriented faction, when it comes to the ones released so far, they have a much reduced access to damage improving abilities and attachments, and that's also going to hold back the total damage value of the Bucklermen going forward. So we do have to remember things like these. We just can't be comparing unit from a faction A to a unit from the faction B and say that, okay, since they have almost exactly the same dice, they are about as good. There's also the forest around the tree that we are taking a look at any given time. When the Black Legion Bucklermen suffer half casualties, their average damage drops to 2 and their maximum damage drops down to 4. And these are starting to be the kinds of numbers that no longer allow the Bucklermen to effectively engage even lighter enemy units. And while I would be wary of activating especially non-officer led or non-support attached Bucklermen to attack at full strength, I would be really disinclined to do so with a half strength unit, since there is a rather high likelihood that any attack that the Bucklermen perform does not end up having any major effects when it comes to casualties inflicted. And what's even worse, if you don't manage to score enough successes in order to push through enough damage to actually win the combat, then there is no morale penalty, or rather stress penalty, on the enemy for losing either. And in that case we can start to ask whether the activation was actually a wasted one. The fact that the hegemony and the northern tribes seem to be the exact opposites of one another in many ways also reflects down to the switch ability available for the basic infantry units, for their basic infantry units. Where the orc hunters have a defensive switch that allows them to exchange their blocks for successes. The Black Legion Bucklermen carry a offensive switch that allows them to add blocks to their attack rolls, thus helping them potentially mitigate any return attacks that come back their way from the defending unit. This switch ability is triggered by a single hollow special symbol, and the orange dice are the best ones out of the offensive dice on providing them having a 25% chance per roll of producing a block enabling symbol. So the Black Legion Bucklermen should on average be producing at least one block when defending, and they have theoretically the possibility of providing as many as 3 when they are at full strength, and 4 when, ironically enough, a bit more, 4 when they are below their half strength threshold. The Black Legion Bucklermen also have access to some hollow successes and some solid specials, the numbers of both of which go up actually when the unit goes down to half or below. But they have no innate ability to make use of these symbols, so if you are looking to leverage them, then that must be accomplished through adding another character to the unit that will help them make good use of these. But again, when thinking about such combinations, it pays to keep in mind that one of the key selling points of this unit is its extremely low cost, and attaching characters immediately affects the unit's total point cost in a disproportionate way. Last thing before advancing to the analysis on the Black Legion Bucklermen, it's time to talk about their excellent defensive capabilities that, in my opinion, form the third part of the triumvirate that are the Bucklermen's virtues of cheap cost, high conquest score, and now excellent defense value. As you see from the breakdown presented here, the Bucklermen have 2 different ways of adding block symbols to their roll, and hence it's necessary for us to have a effective block value indicator at the top of the breakdown. At average 3 and maximum 6 effective block symbols, the Bucklermen are capable of producing a large amount of block symbols for such a cheap and cheerful basic infantry unit, so that's quite impressive in and of itself, even though we do have to remember that as there is a switch ability included, the Black Legion Bucklermen won't be able to leverage this ability in every situation, even if we assume that melee attacks are going to be the primary casualty drivers in most games, and thus the most common threat faced by these soldiers. At above half strength, the Bucklermen are rolling 2 green dice and a black dice for their defense, and as you probably well know by now, the green dice are the ones that are capable of producing double blocks, so that's pretty great. And there are only 2 facings that don't have any blocks associated with them at all, I think, so that's also quite impressive. The black dice isn't all that good at providing blocks, since there are only 2 out of the 8 facings that have the standard block symbol, but it does help notch up the average value just that little bit more. If and when the Bucklermen go to under half strength or half strength for that matter, if there is no officer involved, this defense roll is drastically reduced into 2 blue dice, and each of those blue dice only have a 50-50 chance of providing the Bucklermen with block symbols. The switch ability that the Bucklermen have access to is quite a powerful one in that it's a single special switch that adds additional block symbols to their defense roll. And this means that the green dice can provide some in addition to the blocks that they are usually rolling. And also the black dice becomes way more valuable since it's the best defensive dice at providing the set symbol, and there's even a double special facing out there, so the Bucklermen can really turn up the defensive when suffering from melee attacks of their opponents. Unfortunately, at below half strength or at half strength, the 2 blue dice are again a problem. Yes, there are some facings there with a block and a special, which can lead to a high ceiling value, but the average access to both the blocks and the specials definitely goes down in this case. Another thing that one needs to keep in mind when it comes to utilizing the Bucklermen's high defense score is the fact that the switch ability is not accessible when taking ranged attacks from your opponent or opportunity attacks that result, for example, from disengaging from combat. And in these situations, the Bucklermen can be a little bit more vulnerable than usual since they don't get to convert their specials into blocks. But and also there's the possibility that the enemy is going to take note of the high block producing capabilities of the Bucklermen, and they choose to employ automatic wound infliction against them. But in all of these cases, I think that it's still extremely difficult for the enemy to cost effectively, resource effectively inflict damage upon the Bucklermen, since again we are talking about a 20-point basic infantry unit. So any taking or tactical maneuvers that they have to employ in order to find a way to push damage past their high block score is going to be more or less money for the bank, money into the bank for the hegemony player, since they have now put their opponent on the back foot, forcing them to commit resources to fighting such a basic infantry unit. The Bucklermen also have some access to hollow symbols, but no natural way of making use of these, so they have to look for any attached characters that can help them make use of these, or then you just have to accept the fact that your basic infantry unit is rolling effectively blanks when they are rolling their hollow symbols. There are some pretty excellent attachable options out there, but let's talk about those more in the appropriate videos, shall we? Okay, let's tie this one on a bow and end this short and sweet analysis piece with the final word. I find the Black Legion Bucklermen to be very dependable basic infantry that excel at taking and holding objectives. Unlike, for example, the Orc Hunters, whose basic function is, yes, objective conquest, but more in the way of fighting than simply taking and holding them via their high conquest value. The Bucklermen are lightly armed, and this is reflected on their profile card, and they won't be able to outfight the toughest enemy units out there, but at the same time they do have a rather unique ability in that they are capable of outconquesting more pricey, more elite enemy units, and thus putting the opponent in the back foot when it comes to the scenario play aspect of the game of Warcrow. And in a game that's so much about controlling objectives and not usually, the games usually don't come down to inflicting more casualties, this is a rather important a advantage to make use of. The Bucklermen can be thrown into Hegemony of Embersig companies simply as cheap backline guards who can stand at position, at attention effectively, at backward objectives and keep opposing scouts and ambushers and other maneuver units from being able to easily capture them, or they can be used as a affordable, decently mobile, high defense basis for a tactical element that's then further complemented by a attached character who gives them additional combat and or scenario play power or support capabilities, or maybe a powerful command skill or an aura ability that enhances them somehow, making the combination both cheap and effective. The thing that most people who have played with or against the Black Legion's forces so far have probably ran into is a unit of Bucklermen advancing to an objective, and then Drago using his command skill, the Anvil, to push their conquest value to a whopping 4, at which point the Hegemony player should usually be able to decisively outscore their opponent and flip an important objective for their own. So while I don't personally, as of right now, see the Bucklermen as utilitarian pieces and as common a choice in the hegemony forces as I do see orc hunters in the Northern Tribes forces, I still think that this is a good basic infantry unit that should have its place in at least some lists going forward. Okay, that's my take on the first Black Legion, the first Hegemony unit, all done and wrapped up. Have a great day, fellow travelers, and hope to see you again soon.